Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel and welcome to a Tangled Web episode 3. Yes, in this episode I'm going to be taking a look at the movie Spider-Man 3. Let's talk about it. So if you're new to the channel, then welcome to the channel. If you're a returning viewer, then welcome back. So in this series, because we're just around the corner from the release of Spider-Man No Way Home, I am rewatching all of the Spider-Man films, doing a retrospective review on them, including the animated Into the Spider-Verse, and I will be ultimately doing a ranking. Yes, and I will be doing a review of the new Spider-Man film, obviously, when I go and see it. The ranking will come after that, with that film in mind as well. So, like I said, in this episode we're looking at the third Sam Raimi film, Spider-Man 3. Now, this film was released here in the UK on May the 4th of 2007. It had a 12A rating and a runtime of 2 hours and 19 minutes. So, the longest Spider-Man film thus far, by about 11 minutes, beating Spider-Man 2. This film was again directed by Sam Raimi. And he was given a budget of $258 million. So nearly $60 million more than Spider-Man 2 and nearly $80 million more than Spider-Man 1. This film went on to have a massive worldwide gross of $894 million. So at the time, the biggest grossing Spider-Man movie. Yeah. This film was actually written by Sam Raimi and brother Ivan Raimi, and with the help of Alvin Sargent, who done the actual screenplay for the film, with the help of Sam and Ivan. Okay. We'll get into that. Now, starring in the film, we see Tobey Maguire return as Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. Kirsten Dunst returns as Mary Jane. Topher Grace is introduced as Eddie Brock, Venom. Thomas Hayden Church as the Sandman. James Franco returns as Harry Osborn. Bryce Dallas Howard as Spider-Man's, in the comics, Spider-Man's first love interest anyway, Gwen Stacy. And you've got J.K. Simmons returning as J. Jonah Jameson, as well as a wealth of other cast members, including Bruce Campbell again. Yeah, you know. So, the story for this film, this is going to be a difficult part, believe you me. Okay, so the story for this film catches up with Peter Parker. He's now adored by the city, loved by everyone. Mary J. Watson is doing a fantastic job in her role. She's got a new role on Broadway, acting. But things don't work out for her and that kind of falls apart. And she's mirrored with the success of her struggling for success with the success of Peter Parker and in his dual role as Spider-Man and what the city thinks of him, with a little undertones of jealousy from her in how he's perceived and how she's struggling. So she ultimately loses her job because her acting debut doesn't go very well. She keeps this hidden. You have Harry Osborn return. If you remember, he's now found out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. He attacks him. He has an accident. He bangs his head. Amnesia. Back to being their friend. An alien goo crash lands a meteorite and attaches itself to Peter's bike. You got Sandman, who's introduced he's escaped from prison. He's robbing to get money for his daughter who needs an operation. Like I said, Gwen Stacy's introduced. You got Eddie Brock, who's introduced. So it's a mishmash of story. I'm not even going to go into the story. I'm going to talk about the story, but I'm not going to go into telling you a blow-by-blow detail of this story because this film is so busy. I mean, the story is all over the place, believe me. I haven't seen this film in 15 years. And just for the record, for this version, I watched the editor's cut of the film. All barring one scene, I can't tell you anything that's different, right? I know that reading up, there are some differences, but I haven't seen this film in probably over 15 years. Probably my least visited Spider-Man film, along with The Amazing Spider-Man 2. So I can't recall what was to what is now in this version. I just watched this one because it's a version that I'd never actually viewed. So this is where the problems began with Spider-Man. Yes, this is where the Sony mandate caused problems, coupled with the fact that Sam Raimi and Ivan Raimi are on writing duties. I don't want to knock Sam Raimi because I love Sam Raimi as a director. He's done some fantastic stuff in the past, and I really enjoy a lot of what he's done, including some of this series. The problem is that, like I said, this film is so busy. It's introducing character after character. So you've got Sandman. You've got to get his story. You've got Gwen Stacy. You've got to get her story. You've got to get the story of Eddie Brock, the alien symbiote. So just to put things into perspective, everything feels forced. You know. So you've got Peter out on a date with Mary Jane. They're just in the woods or in a park, in a web, you know, looking at the stars, and they're looking at shooting stars, and about 10 metres away, this rock lands, and it's the Venom symbiote. How convenient is that? Yeah. You've got the introduction of Gwen Stacy, who's now a student with Peter at college. Again, convenience. She's got a thing with Eddie Brock, who is vying for a role at the newspaper against Peter Parker. Convenient. Everything is convenient in this film. It just reeks of bad writing. Now, like I said, I know Sony had input into the film. They forced Venom into the film. Now, director Sam Raimi didn't want Venom in this film. He wanted to stick to the classic era villains. And he was probably right. Venom is a new character in the context of the Spider-Man comics. Venom came about in the sort of mid-80s. I know that's quite a while ago, but when you're comparing him to characters like Goblin, Doc Ock, the Sandman, these are characters that were created at the conception of Spider-Man when Spider-Man first came into being. Venom came later. He's a much later character. You can tell that Sam Raimi didn't enjoy working with this character because he's hardly in it. Venom doesn't actually pop up until the third act of this film, and just for pretty much one fight at the end. Yeah, I know you got the stuff with the suit, and that in itself caused problems of its own. You've got the emo Peter stuff where he's got the dark hair and the eye makeup, and he's walking down the street giving it all this sort of stuff and dancing, and then you go into the club when he takes Gwen Stacy where Mary Jane's now working, and this dance routine occurs that initially feels like it's something out of the Jim Carrey movie The Mask. It wouldn't have been out of place in that movie. It's just so badly done. The decisions are bad, everything like that. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, you've got characters that just disappear after, you know, you have Gwen Stacy disappear after this scene pretty much. She's at the very end at a funeral scene, but she disappears. You've got Sandman that after the fight in the subway, and then the water, he gets beat by some water, and when Peter opens up this pipe, he disappears for a huge chunk of the film to then come back. This sort of stuff's going on. It's just too busy. There's way too much in this movie. Now, with an increased budget of 258 million, you'd expect the special effects to be grander. They're not. I would say that this film actually takes a step back on the special effects compared to the second film. When these characters are fighting in CGI mode, they look like CGI. There's some bad use of green screen, primarily at the fight at the beginning when Harry's fighting Peter and they're going through these thin sort of alleyways between buildings. It looks pretty damn poor. It doesn't look great at all. So the film is just is rife with problems in writing, problems in everything. Yeah. littler characters are given less to do, like J. Jonah Jameson. He's forced into the final battle scene as a spectator down on the ground, just so that he's there, just to give him something to do. Yeah, again, with the writing, the character of Sandman. Now, in the comics, Sandman has got nothing to do with the death of Ben Parker, or Uncle Ben. In this film, they've rewritten the origin story so that he was there at the death. He's the guy holding the gun who accidentally, ultimately pulls the trigger and kills Uncle Ben. And this is stuff that just, it's just forced. Again, this stuff's just so forced. Everything's for convenience, and it's not very good. I'm trying to think of something positive to say about this film. Okay, I have got a positive about the film, that being James Franco, Harry Osborn. Now, out of all the characters in this film, he is the one, as an actor, who could come away and think, you know, I've got some fantastic character growth throughout this film series. You know, I go from being the best friend to being a friend with issues, because there's this in the second one, because as I went into in that review and into this one where you've come into enemy mode. But again, the insomnia story, not insomnia, the loss of memory storyline, that feels forced again, just to like give him something else to do. But ultimately, he has got the best story arc throughout the 3 films, leading to his redemption arc at the end. Now, interestingly, his death mirrors his father's death. He's killed at the hands of his glider, but at the hands of Venom, not by his own hands. He saves Peter, he jumps in front of him, and he gets impaled by his own glider, spikes on his own glider, mirroring his father's death. So, yeah, a bit of a letdown for the end of the series, and because the film has got issues. Like I said, it's just too busy. It feels like you've got 2 films in one in this movie. You know, you can take out the entire Venom. Venom needed his own film, ultimately, right? Topher Grace was miscast in the role, totally, but he needed his own film. And just give this to Sandman and the Harry Osborn storyline, that would have been fine. We're left wondering about what happens to his daughter. Yeah, we don't know. Bryce Dallas Howard and the Gwen Stacy stuff, again, it's just, it craps on the character of Gwen Stacy. This isn't Gwen Stacy. You're doing better off making this a completely different character, giving her a completely different name, because this isn't the Gwen Stacy storyline. This doesn't feel like Gwen Stacy. Again, it's just a poor writing, just throwing character names in just for the sake of it. Yeah, I don't think Ivan Raimi would have right piece on people to write this film. Now, rewatching this film, I remember my thoughts echoing when I first saw it years and years ago, back in 2007. This film doesn't end at its logical conclusion point. Now, interestingly, I watched the editor's cut, and I would have edited this film's end differently. Now, if you're familiar with the film takes us, after all the action, it takes us to the graveyard where you've got the burial of James Franco's Harry Osborn, and then after that you got one final scene where Peter and goes into a club where Mary Jane's singing, and they get back together, and you know it's all happy, right? Now, me personally, I would have cut that scene off totally, so I end at that graveyard. Now, if you remember the end of the very first Spider-Man film, Sam Raimi's first one, the film ends at the graveyard of Norman Osborn, and you have Mary Jane and you have Peter Parker. Mary Jane confesses her love to him, and he turns around and says, no, I can't love you, blah, 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 and turns away and walks away, leaving her stood there while he's walking away. Right, now this film mirrors that in this final scene, in that they're both on separate sides of this grave. it ends with Peter giving a little speech over a voiceover. He's left stood there at the graveyard. She's turned away, walking away, and you're left with this ambiguity about their relationship. Now, this is a fantastic ending to this film, a very brave ending that totally mirrors the end of the first film, and thusly sits as the perfect logical conclusion point for this movie. You don't need to know that they get back together. It would have been better leaving it that their relationship's on rocky terms over the stuff that has occurred. But no, they had to give us this happy ending. She's in a club singing away, he walks in, she comes down to him, cuddle, everything's gonna be fine. Yeah, so this for me, it was a difficult rewatch in that, like I said, there's just so much going on, so much convenience in the plot, so contrived. It was just, yeah, not a very good film at all on rewatch. I can't really think of anything that's positive, like I said, beyond, you know, the growth of the Harry Osborn character. There's some other positive moments in the film, don't get me wrong, but ultimately, not a fantastic Spider-Man film. Anyway, that was my review for Spider-Man 3 from 2007. If you enjoyed that, then number one, come back tomorrow for the first amazing Spider-Man in episode 4 of A Tangled Web. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like and share if you so wish. And if you hit that notification bell, you will be told about my upcoming content and you won't miss anything. So anyway, so this is AJ. Now I'm getting away because I've got another movie to watch. No, anyway, so let's see how Sony can screw up the next ones. Anyway, this is AJ. Thanks a lot. Take care. And I'll see you tomorrow, hopefully. Take care. Goodbye.